signals taped on diagrams. That air gap make you still trust who's talking out past the DMZ. Which valve moves when the script goes wrong? If you don't know the past in the plant at midnight, how you gonna fight when the wave comes on? You can't protect what you can't see. Shadow systems.
Welcome to the webinar. My name's Leon Poggioli. Great to have you here. And today's theme is asset integrity. And as the song says, you can't protect what you can't see. So thought I'd have a little bit of fun with that one. Right, let's get into the webinar. Let me kick off the slideshow so it's in the window. So agenda today, I'll talk a little bit about who NetSec are, the importance of asset integrity. I'll talk about what CPS is, Cyber Physical Systems, and where asset integrity should really fit in a CPS cybersecurity program. Then I'll talk about how you do asset integrity as well as some use cases. Now, I will be using some technology in this webinar. It's not the bulk of the discussion. The technology I'm using is Clarity. The reason for that is because I used to work for Clarity. I'm a Clarity certified engineer. So it's the technology I'm most comfortable using to illustrate some of the use cases. But there are certainly other technologies and tools out there that you can use. And I've got customers that use other tools as well. No issue with that. I just happen to be using Clarity as part of this discussion. So who are NetSeg? Founded this year by me. My name's Leon Poggioli. I used to be the Australian New Zealand RVP of Clarity Industrial. And the reason I started NetSeg was I had this vision of solving those people and process challenges in CPS cybersecurity programs, because the reality is the technology only plays about 20% of the role in the overall program. The rest of it is people process. And that's why I started the organization, because people need that to get the most out of the technology. And if you don't have an OT cybersecurity specialist in your organization, NetSeg can help you. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. But, I can travel within Australia, or I can work remotely if you're somewhere else in the world. Give me a call. We can have a chat about what you're doing. I'm happy to sort of give you some pointers over the phone. And then if it makes sense to engage me longer term, then we can discuss what that might look like. So let's just set the scene a little bit about what the CPS cybersecurity landscape looks like and the mega trend that's driving the need for these kinds of capabilities. So we're really in a perfect storm situation right now with increased automation in OT, plus increased regulation. We have the SOCI Act in Australia. There are other similar regulations in other countries. And in every organization I've met, and I've met hundreds of organizations that have OT networks, OT cyber maturity always lags IT cyber maturity, where ironically enough, if you have an OT network, that's probably where your company makes most of its money. And OT cyber risk also directly impacts safety and production, which is what a lot of people on the shop floor care about. Now, the technology does play a significant role, because you don't want to just pay someone to open up all the cabinets in your factory and work out what's in there and write it down on a piece of paper. But to use the technology the right way, you need the right people process alignment. So not just the people in place, but having them aligned on the outcome, targeting the right priorities to deliver the full business value. Because you can't just push patches out every Tuesday like you can in the IT world. NetSeg addresses this missing piece of the puzzle, and that's really my core focus of what I do and what my organization is going to continue to offer longer term. So what's the importance of asset integrity? Well, as they say, you can't protect what you can't see. And OT environments lag IT environments in maturity. Now, there's a lot of different cybersecurity things that people aspire to do in these CPS environments, like patching, password hygiene, cleaning up default passwords, sticky note passwords, shared passwords, where the person whose identity is attached to it left 6 years ago, but it's not connected to an AD domain, so it's just still sitting there on that PLC. Network segmentation, remote access, all these things rely on fundamentally knowing what's in there. So that asset inventory is really the foundational element that you can then build your program on top of. It's not just about cybersecurity. Being able to provide a live asset inventory is a huge operational benefit for those OT stakeholders. And the number of times I've run an exercise like this for an organization, and we found, these 6 servers should have been decommissioned 4 years ago. That's why we saw telnet connection attempts coming from them, for example. These are the sorts of things you can very quickly pick up and get operational value. And I'm going to talk about a couple of those use cases in this discussion. For example, what's end of life in my factory? The other thing is, once you've got that foundational element in place, it doesn't just help you guide the subsequent cybersecurity investment, but also helps measure the benefits of those investments. For example, if you're deploying a new method of remote access into these organizations and getting away from things like persistent VPN tunnels that manufacturers might have put in over time, if you're putting in a new corporate sanctioned method that's more zero trust and more auditable, you're probably going to also want to close the door to all those other methods that were in place. And the only way you can do that is with the right detection capabilities and asset inventory. So this is why it's such a fundamental piece of the puzzle and why I recommend it's really the first technology investment people make in their programs. So what is CPS? So what's a cyber physical system? So interestingly, the OT world is adopting more and more technology, and that's going to continue to accelerate. Because if you run an OT network and you don't adopt new technology, your company's not going to exist because it's getting more and more competitive now. And CPS really covers, in my view, it's still a little bit of a grey area, but covers those devices connect to physical processes operating in the OT environment. And that's the interesting thing about IT versus OT, where people go, well, is that an IT device or that's an OT device? Well, where is it in the network? If it's in the OT network, especially if it's connected to the OT processes, connected to the movement of atoms, then it's probably considered more of an OT device in terms of how you treat it, how you respond to a cybersecurity incident related to that device, how you make decisions about whether to take it offline. So all those IT, IoT, industrial IoT devices in there are really cyber physical systems, and more of these devices are going to make their way into operational environments. If you focus purely on the SCADA PCN devices like your RTUs, PLCs, HMIs, things like that, you're missing other things that will directly impact plant business consequences, like there's IoT devices that have critical processes like sensors. The IoT devices that are not on the OT network but still make sure the site operates as it should, like physical security controls, like boom gates, HVAC systems, building management systems. And then the other thing is, any of these devices that are in your OT environment that can be compromised if you have a flattish network, if you haven't deployed zones and conduits yet, those can then lead to lateral movement, which is why, a single CCTV camera being hacked isn't the end of the world necessarily. But if you've got a flat network and someone can laterally move into a critical production environment or compromise a safety instrumentation system, then you've got a much bigger issue. And so that's why it's good to look at all the technology devices that are within an OT environment to really understand the role they each play and how you can protect the overall system versus thinking about discrete devices sitting on a DIN rail, for example. That's my personal philosophy, and always happy to be challenged. Send me an email or hit me on LinkedIn. So why hasn't the challenge been solved yet? It's not super complicated. There's a few reasons for this, and this is really where, hiring companies like mine really helps you get a very fast benefit, because it's not about technology domain expertise. There's a lot of people who are smarter than me around OT and OT cybersecurity. But having that really good cross-divisional collaboration between cyber and OT is really the foundational element and comes before any technology comes into the environment, in my view. A lot of cyber leaders are unsure where to start. I can tell you something's not going to work is to turn up to a factory with a clipboard under your arm and wave your title around and say you OT people don't get it, because the factory is where the company makes all its money and you'll be invited to go back to head office. There also haven't been that many major public breaches specifically on OT networks, although that's changing. So the recent Polish electricity cyber attack directly targeted OT environment. And interestingly, from what I read at a high level, lack of visibility made it difficult to coordinate response and do forensics at a level that would have been ideal. If you want to correct me on that, if I'm mistaken, then please email me. There's limited technology maturity. People aren't sure what's there, which is why you can't protect what you can't see. The overall job does seem overwhelming. Like, if I don't know what's in an environment across 20 plants, how do I do a patching program when I can patch once every 3 months? That's the reality. You got to know what to patch and how to make the most use of those windows. You need asset visibility for that. And then finally, there's often not a dedicated person managing that intersection between OT and cybersecurity. And that's really the biggest reason that someone would hire NetSeg. It's not the only thing I do, but it's really the core value I add, where you might not be able to hire a dedicated headcount doing OT cybersecurity, but you could hire me to work 20% of the time and build out your program and use the templates and intellectual property I've developed to accelerate your program. And happy to chat about what that could look like for your organization, because I see a big need for it, which is why I started a company doing it. So OTCSJ is a methodology I've developed. It's not a new compliance standard. There's enough of those already. It's not meant for super mature organizations that have a OT cybersecurity team. But what it is a very lightweight methodology that an organization that doesn't have a dedicated OT cybersecurity person can use to guide their program at a high level and get fast risk reduction versus, hiring a consultant to come in and spend 2 years writing a 600-page document and then, what do I do with this? We've got to turn data into business outcomes fast and protect your organization. So technology doesn't come in until stage 3. And what I'm talking about today is really the beginning of stage 3, discover and assess what's in the environment. Stages 1 and 2 are not technical at all. Stage 1 is getting to know everyone who's involved in that OT cybersecurity program. So shop floor people, cybersecurity people, SecOps people, maybe people in safety. The COO is a great person to talk to understand at a very high level what the plants care about from a production and safety, business impact, business consequences, because then you can align your program exactly what they care about. And then everyone who reports to them out in the factories is going to know what they care about. And when you drop those key terminologies that they've had drummed into them, you're going to have a lot better chance of driving an effective program because you'll have the business context. Then stage 2 is the non-technical risk assessment. So understanding what the business consequences are when a cyber attack hits an OT environment. How does a disruption to these systems affect our ability to do business, our ability to operate safely and keep our people from harm, right? Once you understand those first 2 stages, then you're making much better informed decisions about deploying technology into the environment. And this is where asset integrity comes in. So how do you get asset integrity? A lot of people think, passive network sniffer, we don't want to touch anything in the environment, keep it super passive. That's the lowest risk solution. So yes, by and large, it is the lowest risk solution as long as you have sufficient capacity to span switches and things like that, and you have managed switches that you can actually run span ports off. There are other ways around that. Again, I can help you with that if you have undermanaged switches and legacy environment, things like that. It is safe, but it is complex to implement because you're putting extra hardware into your environment, and the visibility is limited to what is communicated on the wire. Now, you can get some quite good visibility from passive network traffic, but it doesn't give you the full story. It's very hard to get full match CVEs depending on what's communicated over the wire. So you have to combine that, and you need passive network traffic to be able to build a map of the network most of the time and do threat detection and look for that unsanctioned external connectivity. But you want to complement that with other things. And so some of the other key methods people use are bringing in OT project files. So these are often, the historian or whatever, they're also passive, but it's much more comprehensive data. And that's a really good way to get down to like Purdue level 01 devices, field devices that you're probably not going to see on the network. But if you bring in those project files, you can know exactly what's out there actually moving the atoms in your factory. Active scanning, there is more risk. A lot of that risk is perception. And so I find the best way to get plant teams on board with active scanning is to be really transparent about what it does, get them comfortable, do it in a small, low-risk environment. Like if you've got some new furniture polish, you test it on a discrete area first that's out of view. test it on the back of the chair before you put it on the arms of the chair. But you get a lot more information. You can get exactly what's installed on every device. You can get exactly what version of firmware it is. You can get information down to a rack slot level. This is really the golden standard. And the other thing, you don't need hardware to do this. And, I'm using Clarity as an example, but other tools can do this as well, I'm sure. Before you even put the hardware in, you might not even need hardware. You can get a lot of information from an asset integrity perspective without putting a single box on the network, just running some active scans and bringing the OT project files. That's hugely valuable and really accelerates your ability to drive an effective program. And if you need to put hardware in 6 months' time, great, do that later. You don't want to be waiting around for 6 months to kick off your program when you can get 90% of the data you need like that. And then finally, integrations. And this is really a two-way thing. So from an asset integrity perspective, yes, you can get data from integrations, things like NetFlow and SFlow and, Cisco ICE and stuff like that. But, good integrations are two-way as well, where you're getting maybe the ability to, so from an asset inventory perspective, you're getting asset inventory information, and the corporate sanctioned version of CMDB is ServiceNow. Well, bang, Service Graph connector. Just feed the data straight there. No spreadsheets, no uploads, no things like that, just native integration. If the team's using something like, IBM Maximo, for example, being able to update the data in that and giving the OT teams exactly up to date what is in their environment. Hugely valuable. And the best way to find that out is to ask questions and leverage those integrations, because you don't want to run a tool like this in isolation and just create another dashboard for people to log into. So we'll jump to the demo now. It's not a Clarity demo. It's more, how do you do this in a tool? And again, because Clarity is a tool I'm most comfortable with, that's what I'm showing here. So I'll show you basic dashboards and asset information. I'll show you something. It's a really good way to start to build that relationship with those OT stakeholders if you don't have it already, which is reporting on end-of-life devices. I'll also build an alert when a new device appears on the network, because when you're early maturity in OT incident detection response, that's a really good use case that especially OT people or people who work in OT networks that I've talked to have valued in going, well, has someone just plugged something new into the network? We want to know about that. And then finally, I'll show you, how integrations work from a CMDB perspective. So let's jump across to Clarity XDome. Clarity has on-prem and SaaS tools. I'm showing you the SaaS one because it's easier. I'm more comfortable with it. Because I'm a Clarity partner, I've got access to their demo dashboard. If you work for Clarity and don't want me showing the dashboard on YouTube, then send me an email and I'll take the video down or remove this part of it. So, really what this is doing is taking all the data that's collected and presenting it in ways that are useful for human operators. So, these dashboards, you'll want to probably manage depending on role. So, if you're looking at, the default dashboard, you might want to look at from a CISO perspective, different type of dashboard. You'll definitely want to give plant people access to each of these systems, because if we go back to the default dashboard, so the site name I'm going to work with is a worker called Jenny, who's from the Bronx. So Jenny from the block has got 779 devices in her network. And so this is the dashboard that I would build for her. And really, I just save this dashboard as Jenny from the block. I know Jenny well, so she's okay with me making this her dashboard. And I'll save that. And there we go. So Jenny's got her own view of what's happening in the Bronx, right? Now, I'll just jump back to the normal default dashboard, because when we go to devices, we want to sort of see everything and then look at just Jenny's devices in the Bronx. So, this is kind of cool. Looks nice when you show people the different kinds of devices in the environment. But what I like to do is have a more data-driven view on things. And so we can see, and this is actually a view I created. So let's just go to the normal view first. So let's reset all this. Reset. I'll change my view back to Let's just look at everything. All right, we can see all the devices here, right? So advanced filters, we want to look at, we want the insights to be end of life. So end of life notification, we want to apply that. And then we want to look at Jenny's assets in the Bronx, which is in a different dashboard. Let's just go back here, manage save views. So let's look at Xdome default. Sorry, here we go. All right, back to Xdome default. So we want end of life notification, apply, 45 devices, and then we want the site name to be the Bronx. And we have one device here, which is an Access IoT device. Now, if we go into that, so this is the device we might want to, so we first slide up, we're going to call Jenny and say, hey, Jenny, we found an end-of-life device, just Access device here. What's it for? It's a video encoder. Well, if Jenny's got this access, she can start to look at device purpose and go, well, what's it for? Well, it's actually a quality control device that runs in the inspection zone in the case packing part of the factory. And now we have the asset purpose categorized, and it's much better to factory people to take control of this and own it. Otherwise, you're becoming their admin person. And you can also upload things like SBOMs from the device manufacturer. So if you need to do SBOM reporting. But there's a lot of information you can gather out of this, and this is just from what's being collected. I can see here that it's been primarily passive data collection, right? So just from on the wire. So you can see a lot on the wire, just not absolutely everything. IP address, MAC address, things like that, who made it, risks and things like that. We'll talk about the risk in a separate discussion. But the fact that it's end of life shows that now's the time when you're prioritizing refresh, you might want to prioritize refreshing this particular device, right? And that is very valuable for an OT asset owner to be able to look at, right? And then if we go, what else we probably want to show Jenny is if we go back to our Bronx view and then change the advanced filters to no filter, then here are Jenny's 779 devices. So being able to walk her through this is a really good starting point of what's in the environment. She might want to know what are the OT devices in the environment. We can filter just down on the OT devices. There's 63 devices, what they look like. Are there devices that should have been decommissioned, are still sitting on the network, for example? All sorts of things that you can get just from having this at your fingertips in one place. So hugely effective. And look, I'll be honest, a lot of the tools do this. I'm just using Clarity to show you what it looks like. So we've done end-of-life reporting. We've done asset purpose. We've done dashboards and asset info. So new device appearing on the network. So what we want to do then is go into alerts. Now, a lot of these alerts are cybersecurity alerts, but for an OT person, a lot of the time, not so interested in that unless it's directly affecting safety and production, in which case it's actually more of a business continuity issue that happens to manifest as a cyber alert, cyber root cause. But let's look at alert configurations, because there's a whole lot of different alerts and a lot of them are security, but device end of life is one of these alerts, right? Where you can set alerts when a new device end of life comes up. And then what we want to do is then build a custom alert when a new device appears on the network, right? So what we're going to do is add alert, and we want the alert type to be custom device alert, and the attribute. Now, there's a huge amount of attributes that I can select from here, but what we're going to look for is it's passive collection first seen. Now, why are we looking at passive collection first seen? Because if we're doing another scanning method that scans point in time, You might scan a subnet that's got 60 devices on it, and bang, you'll get 60 alerts related to a device first seen where, you know, they might already be known devices. What we want to do is devices appearing on the network, which we can see with passive, right? So this is a better way. We're continuously scanning what's happening on the network with our spans. So we want passive collection first seen, and we want to see in the last 24 hours. So we've got effectively a daily alert when something new happens on the environment. And let's call this new rogue device. Apply. And bang, there is our new custom alert that is enabled. And so whenever a new device appears on the network, that gets triggered and you can configure it to send an alert to the SOC. And then the ideal workflow that kicks off, and I've built SOC playbooks around this, is they do some investigation, make sure it's not related to a new project or something, because you'll look silly if you call and say we've found a new device on the network, and the people in the factory go, yeah, we just implemented it. Have you not seen the project files in Maximo, for example? So check that first, and then call and say, right, we've seen this device appear on this switch. Can you find out what's going on? And then you've got some context to go and work with the internal stakeholder at that particular plant location to identify what's happening and then respond accordingly. Hopefully, if it is something suspicious, you can unplug it. No one screams, nothing breaks, and you've just protected your organization. So the final thing is integrations, and pretty straightforward. Now, this is a demo system, so I don't have a demo instance of ServiceNow that I can integrate with. But effectively, you just want to go into support integrations under system settings, and you can see all the different kinds of vendors that it integrates with. Again, a lot of technologies do this, so I'm not saying Clary's the only tool that does this. But you're going to want to look at like CMS, and CMMS and CMDB, right? Now, ServiceNow and IBM are both supported, and gives you a link to the ServiceNow store, integration FAQs there. You can go to that if you want to find out how to implement it. That's the guide on how to do it. And there's also an API that you can leverage as well. So, this is the real power when you've got all that data, but you're not creating a dependency on people having access to this dashboard, where you can just go and integrate that with another tool that they might use on a day-to-day basis, and you're adding value, and the tool's doing its job. The last thing I'll show is the actual reporting, because the other thing you might want to do is just show people, what's in the asset inventory, what's been reported. And so you just go into reports here and you can build a report. So you might want like high-level stats. Let's add that widget, device count over time. And you can filter this. If you edit the filters here, you can say we want the site to be just for, this is Jenny's report, so we'll just do it for the Bronx. Right, 779 devices. We've got annoyingly, but we'll have to filter this one on the Bronx as well, which is, not a big deal because we can just make this happen monthly. And then maybe let's look at, let's find end of life and unsupported devices. So let's add that in as well, by the Bronx. There we go. And we can schedule that to happen monthly, or we can just generate one right now. So that, at a very high level, is how you can use asset inventory to underpin the rest of your CPS cybersecurity program. So to conclude, asset integrity underpins all the other technology decisions that you're having in CPS cybersecurity programs. So it really needs to be the first technology you put into place. Without it, you can't identify and prioritize those key risks that you need to remediate. And providing a live asset inventory and ideally access to a system like this to each plant stakeholder is hugely valuable for those operational stakeholders. You get the asset inventory in place live with a tool like Clarity, and you can have a strong program foundation you can build the rest of your program on. And you can do things like this pretty fast. If you do collection in the right way, get the stakeholders on board to support what needs to happen, getting spans and things like that. And then it's really a case of building up the rules, learning in the environment, and then progressively maturing your cybersecurity program. So all the other cyber stuff I'm going to do in subsequent webinars. So I'm going to do exposure management, which is, vulnerability management as well as other exposures. I'm going to do network segmentation, and we'll do threat detection. So hope this was valuable. If you want to get in touch with me, Leon at NetSegIO is the best way to reach me. If you want to call me, that's my phone number. If you call me in the middle of the night because you're in another country, I won't hear it because I set everything do not disturb at night. But hope this is valuable. Love any comments, email, feedback, what you'd like to see in the next one, specific use cases. I'm happy to do another video like this in the future if there's specific use cases you wanted to explore. So hope it was useful, and have a great day securing your environment.